We are now 1 week away from the Ontario election campaign. All of the major party leaders have been campaigning across the province, and now it will be up to Ontarians to ultimately decide whether or not they want Stephen Del Duca, who is branding the Ontario Liberal Party as a new party with new innovative ideas, whether it is the time to give Andrea Horwath the power of government, or whether they want more of the same with Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives. Joining me now to discuss all of the last week on the campaign trail is Alvin Tedjo, former Ontario Liberal leadership candidate and Liberal commentator, Kim Wright, NDP commentator and with Wright Strategies, and Mitch Hempel, who is filling in as Melanie Paradis is away, who is Melanie Paradis' husband, but more importantly was a chief of staff in the Ford government and also a staffer in the Ontario government. Thanks all for joining me. Alvin, we'll start out with you. Stephen Del Duca and the Ontario Liberal leader has been campaigning, I think it's safe to say generally, in sort of the same way throughout the election campaign. Again, kind of reiterating the fact that he believes it's a new Ontario Liberal team with new sorts of ideas. Speaking a little bit about whether or not you think that message will resonate with Ontario voters.
I think Ontario voters probably still have a bit of a hangover from the Liberal days. 15 years is a long time. As much, I think he's doing what he has to, which is try to distance himself a little bit and try to create his own identity. And he's really introducing himself to Ontarians for the first time. So I think that is the right thing to do in terms of a strategy to get out there, present new candidates. He's got mostly new candidates running in lots of ridings, which is good and bad. They have slightly less of experience in terms of campaigning and are a little less jaded at the process, which is maybe a good thing. But they have a lot of policy ideas that they're trying to introduce and separate themselves from previous administrations. And I think that's obviously the strategy they needed to employ. Right now, it's sort of waiting to see if it worked or not. People are voting. The turnout seems to be higher with the advanced polls that we're seeing coming in right now. That's usually good, but in terms of interest overall, it seems to be down. And that would normally point to not defeating the incumbent government. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in a week.
Mitch, do you think that ultimately Ontarians will decide that, they want basically 4 more years of Doug Ford? Do you think that the way that Doug Ford's governed, he'll be able to convince Ontario voters that ultimately he is the best person out of all the major party leaders to govern the province?
I think if you look at the concerns of Ontario voters right now, whether that's inflation, affordability, housing, you're talking about issues that are very much in Doug Ford's wheelhouse and have been his entire political career going back to Toronto City Council. If this is an affordability election and that's the way it's shaping up, like it's a home game for Doug Ford. So I think right now we're looking at 4 more years of Doug Ford in the Premier's office, and barring the unforeseen, that's how it'll end up on Thursday night.
Kim, if you have any thoughts on that, go ahead. But also just in terms of whether or not we've been hearing a lot about Doug Ford majority versus Doug Ford minority, what do you think are the chances of either of those at this point? And what do you think would happen if, say Doug Ford were to form a minority government? Because obviously then together the Liberals, NDP, and Greens, that would mean they would have more seats than the PCs.
Yeah, look, there's lots of various scenarios, and here's what we know. It is always about who shows up and actually voted, and what is charitably been referred to as a very boring election. And I'm being very kind in saying that. It means it's all about your ground game, how many votes you're identifying, and more importantly, how you're getting them into that ballot box. And those types of battles really do favor folks who are motivated, and that has tended to be New Democrats. They have been very good about running ground game. And in this election campaign, they have a lot more seats that already have fully staffed campaigns that aren't just, gosh, thanks for being the candidate this time. They're fully functioning, multi-dimensional campaigns that are identifying votes and getting them out there. It's very interesting to me, and we've seen this. We saw this today. The Liberals love this. We're the new party. As if Stephen Del Duca hasn't been doing this, frankly, since I started in politics when I was 13. Stephen Del Duca started in politics when he was a teenager. He ran Working Families Coalition. He's been writing platforms. He was at the cabinet table, and somehow that all seems to mysteriously be forgotten. But even worse, What we saw today, Wyatt, really offended me both, as a person who believes in public service and a person in politics. His accusations about his second candidate in Chatham-Kent Leamington being fired because of some sort of sexism. No, it was fraud. They tried to defraud voters. This person hasn't resigned. They're trying to change the channel that Elections Ontario is investigating this and trying to make accusations that it's anything other than fraud. Frankly, that's the same stuff we've seen from Liberals for years. No accountability, no taking responsibility. It happened for 15 years. It's going to keep happening. Really wish people would move beyond that. And we'll talk about the ridiculous chicken suit stunt. But none of this is helping motivate Liberals to go out and vote. In fact, it's probably demotivating their base.
Alvin, do you think that, Kim, in terms of some of those points that she made, I guess just kind of your general thoughts on some of them, do you think that some of those things may, become a disadvantage to the Liberals?
I thought it was telling during the debate, and we talked about this last week a little bit, that the strategy wasn't for Stephen Del Duca to attack Andrea on the whole, and he was focused on.
He's attacked her every single day, Alvin. I'm sorry. I cannot let that fly. He attacked her during the debate. He's attacked her every single day. And this whole, I'm not attacking people is such not truth. So,
and that's what I'm going to agree with you, Kim. I was going to say that's what he said on the stage. Is like, I'm not trying to attack you. I wanted to focus on Mr. Ford. But then his actions and his words following that have not followed through. But if he did follow through, I don't know that would be a bad strategy to try and rise above it and try to show a different side of politics. Unfortunately, the party has had challenges with some candidates. They've had some candidates that they've had to dismiss. There are, I think, 3 candidates right now short of a full slate. You could chalk that up to, trying to rebuild the party after the pandemic, or not having the resources that they've had before to vet candidates or to get people as excited about running to be candidates. You've got some great star candidates in certain ridings, but it's tough to fill out 124. I think what's going to be really interesting is to see how this fleshes out, because there's going to be a lot of 3-way battles and a lot of New Democrats versus Liberals and a lot of ridings that aren't taking votes away from the Conservatives. And so can the progressive vote really come through and not let the Conservatives come up the middle, depending on where you live? Scarborough, Mississauga, Brampton, Ottawa. There's a lot of these areas where, we just named about 20 seats right there that could really make the difference in this election.
Mitch, in terms of vote splitting, obviously there's the potential for that perhaps on the left between the Liberals, NDP, and the Greens. You hear a lot from the Liberals that they're the best choice over the NDP, and you hear that from the NDP that they're the best choice over the Liberals. Do you think there's any concern of that on the right at this point, or is it primarily just a battle of the PCs?
No, like I've had the great misfortune of being in campaigns with Jim Carahalios, and this is the quietest I've ever seen him. Usually he suits somebody by now. The reality on this one is we aren't gonna see New Blue and Ontario Party combined get what Maxime Bernier got in Ontario in the fall. I'd be shocked if they got half of that, to be totally honest. They might play in a riding like Cambridge where they've got an incumbent. But there are dodos more alive than the New Blue Party is in this province.
Okay, and then finally, just to Kim, what are you expecting in the last week of the campaign from all of the major party leaders?
Look, I think this is about reinforcing your ballot box, motivating your base, and in the case of, some leaders trying to hold on to their own seat or win their own seat. That is not the case for Andrea Horwath, just to be clear. That's not who I was referring to. So it is about going out there, motivating in those key battlegrounds. We're going to see a lot of those sort of long nights in that 401 corridor from Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge down to Windsor, across the north, parts of Eastern Ontario, Peel region, Durham. Those are the places where I'm looking to see lots of movement. And what I'm looking for, and I suspect everyone else on this panel is, where are the leaders going? That'll give you a pretty clear sense of either where they're trying to shore up and where they're trying to win those battleground seats.
And just to add to what Kim was saying in terms of what the leaders are doing, I think that's important to talk about, because on election night, a week from now, there is no guarantee that every opposition leader is going to be around after the election, right? Ms. Horvath had this is her fourth election. If she wins, obviously she's going to continue. The question is, will she continue if she doesn't? And Mr. Del Duca has a real race on his hands. And if he doesn't win his own seat, and if he doesn't come as official opposition, he will not have met the expectations of his party, who are almost always win or bust. And so, the question will be if he sticks around.
Okay, Alvin Tedjo, Mitch Hempel, and Kim Wright. Thank you all so much for joining me, and it's been great chatting with you all.
Thank you. Go vote, everyone.